program are those of the commenters alone. They do not represent the views or opinions of Valley News Live, our parent company, or our advertisers.
What if I told you that by owning a gun, you could get kicked out of your apartment? An apartment building in Colorado is telling their tenants, hey, get rid of your firearms or basically get lost. With us tonight to find out if this is legal or not, attorney Greg Thompson is a shareholder with the Anderson, Bottrell, Sandin, and the Thompson law firm, and he specializes in landlord-tenant law. Greg, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. So I saw the story. I was shocked. How in the world can a landlord trump someone's Second Amendment rights?
Well, you know, Chris, although there's been numerous incidents of guns going off in the Fargo-Moorhead area, either intentionally or unintentionally, landlords do have the right to adopt reasonable rules and regulations for their properties. So the question is, does that create a conflict between the Second Amendment rights of the tenants and the landlord's right to adopt reasonable rules and regulations? One of the issues that comes about here is, when do the rules apply? And technically they would apply to anybody who's under a new lease or if the lease comes up for renewal. So it would not apply if that rule was adopted to a tenant who's in the middle of a lease.
But even if I'm a new tenant and I read my Second Amendment rights shall not be infringed, so you know, you hear always about how federal law will trump state law or etc. How in the world can federal law not trump a landlord?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not sure any court has addressed that particular question yet. Obviously, you're right that federal law definitely is going to trump state law, and technically by design should also trump any reasonable rules and regulations adopted by a landlord on a local level. The question would be, is that prohibition a complete prohibition of the person's right to bear arms, or is the landlord just going to say, I'm not keeping you from keeping your firearms, you just have to keep them in a different place? The tenant's going to argue, what if I don't have another place to keep it? You're still prohibiting me under the Second Amendment.
And the gentleman that they actually interviewed in this article is a former Marine Corps veteran. He's 77, he's on a fixed income, not going to be easy for him to move. He's got a conceal and carry permit. And yet they're going to tell this guy, hey, either get rid of your firearm or get lost.
Yeah, and the rule could apply to him, like I said, in a situation where the lease is up for renewal, but not in the middle of a lease term. The other interesting question is whether a landlord could evict under those circumstances. In North Dakota and in Minnesota, an eviction is only possible if there's a material violation of the lease. So the question then arises, is this a material violation of the lease?
What does that mean specifically?
Well, something substantial. And frankly, in this area, I kind of doubt if any judge would say that that's a material violation of the lease. You know, if he's got a conceal and carry permit, there's been no other issues with that particular tenant, I doubt that an eviction would ensue. However, if the lease is up for renewal, the landlord could just simply give a 30-day notice and the tenant would probably be forced to leave.
So even in North Dakota, if a tenant were to change, once you were going to renew your lease, you literally could get thrown out even in North Dakota and Minnesota.
Yes, even if the lease is up at the end of a term, say a one-year term, either party can terminate for any reason, and the same if the lease goes on a month-to-month basis. Either party can give notice.
Does this seem absurd to you? Because again, I go back to my rights shall not be infringed, and I hear I'm to protect my home with the castle doctrine, stand your ground law, and to think that a landlord would come in and boot me and infringe upon my Second Amendment rights just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, it definitely creates a conflict. And certainly that tenant's going to have a constitutional argument in court, whether it be on an eviction basis or some other basis. However, if the landlord doesn't like what they're seeing and the lease is up for renewal, that notice can be given to the tenant, and they frankly don't have much choice.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for coming in and trying to help clear that up. But it seems like there's a lot of clarity because, as you mentioned, the Second Amendment. But again, would love to hear from you. I mean, to me, this seems absolutely absurd that somebody can come in as a landlord and infringe upon your Second Amendment rights. At least say, hey, you got to have a safe or something to that effect, but to say you got to get booted or get rid of the gun, I just don't get it. Go to our website. Let us know how you feel. You can go to 630pov.com. As you can see here, you can email us, text us. We're going to come back with your point of view. Stay close.